Welcome, friends, to this time of worship. Welcome to first-time viewers, to relative newcomers, to our faith, to longtime members of this congregation. How good it is to gather together virtually across the interweb. I am the Reverend Dr. Kelly Murphy Mason, Senior Minister of the Unitarian Universalist Society of Wellesley Hills, and I extend a warm welcome to everyone watching the broadcast of this Sunday service, either through the UU Wellesley Hills website or our Facebook page. We are very grateful to our remote participants who widen the reach of this beloved community. Whether you are feeling jubilant or heartbroken, frightened or courageous, you belong with us. May all of us find peace in this hour. Whoever you are, wherever you find yourself on your personal journey, whatever the sources of your faith, we are glad to have you with us today as we hold our Touchstone service addressing good and evil and look ahead to the upcoming Juneteenth holiday. Welcome, everyone.
Good morning. I am Michael Packard, Acting Director of Educational and Family Ministries at UU Wellesley Hills, where for 150 years we have been gathering in community. For generations, we have built a supportive community that eases our loneliness and opens our hearts. Please know that for this virtual worship, you can find our order of service on the This Sunday page on our website. Be sure to follow UU Wellesley Hills on all our social media outlets to keep current on our many happenings. All weekly events, including our casual chat, midweek reflection, musical meditation, all ages activity, and bedtime stories, can be accessed online. You'll find the links to all of those in the monthly calendar on our website. Please note that our church program year ends next Sunday, and we will soon be operating on our reduced summer schedule. Immediately following the service today, we will hold our 2020 annual meeting and celebration in our Zoom room. Be sure to join us there. Next Sunday, we hold our first ever online flower celebration to mark the end of the program year. This June, we'll observe our beloved annual tradition in a new way, with a slideshow of our friends and members holding their favorite annual blossoms, or maybe near your annual blossom. So please email your floral photos to me at the church office by 11:30 on Friday, June 19th, at the very latest. On Sunday, June 28th, you're invited to watch a live stream of the Sunday worship from the 2020 UUA General Assembly at 10 a.m. After that, we'll be holding our virtual chapel services at 10 a.m. each Sunday. And both the online worship and the virtual fellowship will happen in our Zoom room. This year, we are building Beloved Community as part of our 2019 and 2020 Touchstones project. And in June, Touchstone is good and evil. One should see the world and see himself as a scale with an equal balance of good and evil, Maimonides wrote. When he does one good deed, the scale is tipped to the good. When he does one evil deed, the scale is tipped to the bad. What are you doing to tip the scale in our world today? We encourage you to join a monthly Touchstone group, which will be meeting over the summer, all of them. Each Sunday, we take a few moments to recognize some of our many volunteers. Today, we want to thank the members of the Welcoming Committee. This year, under the leadership of Loie Williams, they've organized circle suppers and happy hour for our newest members. And every Thursday morning at 10:30, members of the Welcoming Committee host a coffee circle in Zoom. And that will continue gathering over the summer months, so join them when you can. on Thursday at 10:30 a.m. Now, we invite those watching the broadcast of our worship service on our UU Wellesley Hills Facebook page. Take a moment to announce yourself in the audience and greet one another in this electronic community of ours.
For millennia, people have gathered together to hear stories, to root for the underdog, to jeer the evil and unkind. We see in our stories mirror to our own lives, where we hope good things will happen and that evil will be vanquished. This morning, we gather for story, for cheering and for jeering, for hope and for justice. May ancient stories shed new light on our own lives. These are the words of the Reverend Sharon Wiley. Let us worship together. The flaming chalice is a shining symbol of our Unitarian Universalist commitments. The words for our chalice lighting are spoken in unison. If you have a chalice on hand at home, you may want to light yours now. We light these chalices to illuminate our faithful way forward as an inspirational community of hope. Together, we seek spiritual growth. We strive for just and responsible action. We dedicate ourselves to leading lives of compassion and purpose. Knowing how we have been blessed, we choose to bless the world.
Good morning. I am Susie Cartren, Director of Music at Unitarian Universalist Society of Wellesley Hills. Please join me in singing with our choir for our opening hymn, May Nothing Evil Cross This Door. This was recorded last spring before the pandemic.
You've probably all heard a story about a girl in the box. It's part of our European cultural mythos, the symbolism and the moral lessons. But what version of the story do you know? Do you know that the original Greek had the word pythios, which means jar? It was Pandora's jar. Well, somewhere around the 16th century, it changed to pyxis, which is a type of box. And nowadays, I'd say the more popular and well-known story is the one of the box. So I'm going to go with the version of the box. Before we get into what happens with the box, there's a little bit of backstory. See, Zeus was the head god. He was white, male, he was power hungry. He had bad temper too. Some could consider him a petty tyrant and would lash out at people for the most minor infraction. Lesser god, or titan known as Prometheus, had created humans out of clay. Zeus didn't really like humans that much, but what really infuriated him about Prometheus is that Prometheus stole fire from the gods. He had asked permission and was denied, but he felt that humans really needed this fire. Well, not only did Zeus punish Prometheus for doing this, he felt, I gotta get at the humans too, because I don't really like them, and I think they need to get punished as well. But he wasn't as direct. He made a plan, and this plan involved goddesses creating a woman out of earth who was both beautiful and strong. And to this woman was given all the gifts all the positive gifts that could be given to humans, all the gifts of all the gods too, all the things that they excelled in. And this woman, first of all, was named Pandora, which means to whom all great gifts are given. And she was also given curiosity. And it was this curiosity which was the key to Zeus's plan. So where the gods lived, Mount Olympus, Zeus brought Pandora down from there, and he introduced her to Epimetheus, who was Prometheus's brother, because again, Zeus was petty and he wanted to get back at Prometheus in a more subtle way. Well, Epimetheus fell in love instantly with Pandora, and soon they were married. Some of the stories say that Pandora already had the box with her, but we'll say Zeus gave Pandora and Epimetheus the box as a gift for their marriage. Prometheus had warned Epimetheus not to accept any gifts from Zeus, but he kind of had no choice. And Zeus said, just don't ever open this box. You can have it. And it was a nice box, but don't ever open it. But what Epimetheus didn't know was that Pandora had an insatiable curiosity and that she was not going to help herself until this box was opened. Now, again, here's where some variations are. Sometimes the box is locked, sometimes it's not. I'm going to go with a locked box. Day after day, Pandora looked at this box and was just wondering what in the world could be in there. And this consumed her day. And the fact that she couldn't get in because of the lock and there was no key to be found just really bothered her, so that she really couldn't do anything else. Well, one day she was napping, and mysteriously, magically, there was a key under her pillow. This was a golden key, and she immediately knew that it must go to that lock. She picked it up and ran into the room. Epimetheus heard her running, and he ran after her because he figured he knew what she was going to do. But by the time he got there, she had already unlocked the box and opened it. And what was inside the box? Well, my box is nothing. But what flew out were all the evils that humanity had never known yet. It's greed, envy, malice, conceit. All these things, maybe sometimes in the form of fairies, were flying around everywhere, and they could not get them back in the box. And they were forever out for humanity to deal with. Well, Epimetheus or Pandora shut the box to try to not let anything else out. And there was one more thing in there. And they thought, well, what else could go wrong? So they opened it back up, and it was hope. One more thing, hope. And they let hope out. And ever since, is that hope that humanity has held on to let them through the wickedness that was let out of Pandora's box.
Two weeks ago, I watched two men and a machine reduce the house next door to shards of wood, plaster, and shingles in the space of 5 hours. My thoughts, of course, drifted immediately to the second law of thermodynamics. I'm sure yours would have as well, right? The second law is one of the most well-supported and fundamental ideas in all of science. It basically says, simplistically, I will admit, that everything in the universe will eventually decay to a more random, chaotic, or disordered state, a condition called entropy. You deal with entropy all the time. It's what happens to your house unless you continue to expend energy, keeping it neat and orderly. It happens to an ice cube melting on the floor. Order, neatness, structure, whether at the level of molecules, bureau drawers, or galaxies, must be achieved by the expense of work. Otherwise, chaos and randomness will automatically follow with little or no effort. Entropy is easy. A house turned to rubble in 5 hours being but one example. What, pray tell, does any of this have to do with good and evil? I'm proposing here that it is the exploitation of this fundamental law of the universe, which is the handmaiden of all evil. Criminals, terrorists, and despots know that destruction and chaos are attained with relatively little effort. A single bullet can destroy a living thing in an instant, a living thing that may have taken decades, developing into someone that writes symphonies, cures disease, or builds houses. On an even grander scale, a single airplane can bring down a skyscraper. Nuclear bombs can destroy cities, even entire civilizations that have taken centuries to build. In more personal terms, you all know that it takes serious time, effort, and goodwill to build a reputation, or to earn the trust of others, or to build loving relationships. The investment of continual care and effort is required to keep these connections intact. Failure to do so could quickly destroy what has taken so long to create. Such relationships are prized possessions worthy of the work needed to maintain them. My takeaway is that destruction, or entropy, is easy and construction is hard. Evil is easy. Good is hard. My own upbringing in the Presbyterian Church introduced me to serpents and apples from the tree of good and evil, to a God who would ask a good and righteous man to sacrifice his son. Oh, come on, Abraham, I was just kidding. To drowning all of humanity save one family, or to countless other acts of violence, vengeance, and retribution. Later in college, I read Dante's Inferno. Now there's a fun story. Here's the devil, the archetype of evil, enthroned in ice at the center of hell, presiding over 9 levels of increasing torment based on some cosmic point system of sins. And of course, there's medieval history, brimming with stories of burning witches and heretics at the stake, with sellout crowds gleefully watching. And of course, the unimaginable brutality of wars and crusades. Most of the above done in the name of God. And of course, it's not just ancient history. We have our very own Hitlers, Stalins, Maos, Bin Ladens. Pick your despot, your terrorist, your school shooter. All have the common element of employing chaos, destruction, and fear, entropy basically, to achieve their goals. And the effect of all this evil on good people? I remember as a teacher how a negative experience could stay with me for days, making me wonder why I was doing this for a living. But there were also many successes which felt great. For some reason, however, they didn't have the long temporal impact of a negative event. The lesson learned: negativity, chaos, randomness can eat us alive if we let it. Facing the evil around us can feel overwhelming, but we cannot just throw up our hands. We all know that doing good can sometimes seem like trying to hold back the tide. Building, creating, fighting entropy. It's hard and often frustrating, but it's also enormously satisfying. If doing good is hard work, it is also the most satisfying work of our lives. We are presently slogging our way through a pandemic with heartening shows of love, support, cooperation, and goodwill. A harder and longer road confronts us in solving issues around race and myriad other discriminations against the other. May we bring the same constructive attributes and unrelenting good works to bear in solving these systemic evils.
Each Sunday, this congregation collects a weekly offering as part of its larger spiritual practice of generosity. This morning, UU Wellesley Hills will be collecting donations to support Camp Starfish. This summer, Camp Starfish is unable to open due to the COVID-19 outbreak. This is devastating for the children and families and has a dramatic impact on the financial prospects of the camp. Without camper tuition to fund the annual expenses, the camp faces a $315,000 shortfall, which it is working to fill now. Help us ensure that Camp Starfish can serve campers and families next year and for many years to come. During the weeks that we have virtual worship, donations will be taken electronically. Visit Give on our website and go to the online giving page that will allow you to make online payments using Breeze. Once there, be sure to select Plate Collection from the drop-down menu. It takes maybe a couple of minutes at most, so we invite you to donate now. If you choose to mail a check to our church office, be sure to put Camp Starfish on the memo line. Please be as generous as you can in your support of Camp Starfish this Sunday. us unite our hearts in prayer, giving voice to the words of the Reverend Bruce Southworth. O source of life and love, torn by desires to sit back and enjoy the beauty of the world, to savor these blue skies and gentle days, and by our desires to recast the world and fight its evils, to save the world. Torn by all those things that hurt and confuse and make no sense amidst beauty, yet supported by all those things that heal and hold us, smiles, kisses, warm words, we live in mystery. We live torn apart at times, so much glory, so much pain. We live in faith, faith in ourselves and each other, faith that we can create bonds of the Spirit that proclaim we are not alone. We have so much health within us. We can live through the heartaches to new life. So, for the grace of the world and all the tumble too, this day we give thanks. Amen. With these words now on our minds and in our hearts, let us enter into the sacred stillness of a shared silence, listening for the wisdom within. Ours is a spiritual community where we find and forge connection. We trust in the strength of our mutual support, knowing how it has sustained us day after day, year after year. We heed its call to build beloved community. Today we hold in the light the memory of Rayshard Brooks, an unarmed Black man killed by police in Atlanta this week, who now joins the ranks of Oscar Grant, Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice, Michael Brown, Sandra Bland, Eric Gardner, Philandro Castile, Freddie Gray, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and far too many others, as another casualty of police brutality and anti-Black violence in this country. And we lift up all those who say their names in Black Lives Matter protests across the nation, recognizing the tragedy of lives lost in America. All those who remind us that the promises of freedom that the upcoming Juneteenth holiday celebrates have yet to be fulfilled for African Americans struggling with systemic racism, with its tremendous communal, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual costs. Now we invite you to recall the names of persons or places you're holding in your hearts, either as a source of concern or cause for celebration. If you have candles on hand at home, you may want to light one for our collective joys and another for our collective sorrows. As you feel moved, you may share the names of those persons or places by typing them into our Facebook page. These will be read aloud next Sunday morning, but will be held in all our hearts and thoughts until then. This morning we name Marge and Pete Schellenberg, Chris Lilly, Laura Pate, Sally and Rick Watts, Eve Slater, Emily Senecal Miller, Liz Becker and Ben Unger, Maggie Walsh and the VA staff, Amy Collins, Marianne Lafitte, the family of Scott Ward, Suzanne Hecker and Lilia Elliston. These names have been heard and honored in this community. Alongside these, we know are certain joys and sorrows that remain private and unspoken this hour. Those too have a rightful place. May fellow feeling encourage each of us toward ever more compassionate living. Our kindled lamps remind us that we are all kindred souls. We are never alone in the human condition. There is a love that cares for all.
Please join me in our meditation on breathing. We will sing it through 3 times. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love.
Our responsive reading this morning is taken from the writings of biblical scholar Eusebius. May I be no one's enemy, and may I be the friend of that which is eternal and abides.
May I wish for every person's happiness and envy none.
May I never rejoice in the ill fortune of one who has wronged me.
May I, to the extent of my power, give needful help to all who are in want.
May I never fail a friend.
May I respect myself.
May I always keep tame that which rages within me.
May I accustom myself to be gentle and never be angry with others because of circumstances.
May I know good people and follow in their footsteps.
Earlier this week, the family of George Floyd held a funeral for him at the Fountain of Praise Church in Houston, the city where he was raised. Only a couple of years ago, he had moved from there to Minneapolis, where last month he was killed by a police officer who held his knee on Floyd's neck for nearly 9 minutes. All of you know the ghastly details of his death. You have probably watched the video recording of him on the pavement or read the sickening accounts of his last words, horrified, as I was, by yet another Black man dying at the hands of police. Speakers at his funeral issued a rallying cry for overdue justice, for an immediate stop to police brutality, white supremacy, hate crimes, and racial profiling. But they also voiced their hope that all the good that filled his abbreviated life, their fondest memories of him as a family member, friend, and neighbor, not be erased by the evil incident that ended it. Perhaps you have seen that touching photograph of Floyd standing with the men in his church group, holding aloft a red Bible with his name engraved on its cover. Floyd mentored youth in his community and was respected there as a person of faith. In that group photo, he holds his Bible in one hand while his other hand rests on a friend's shoulder. All the men are standing close together. One of them has his hand on Floyd's shoulder. You can sense the strength of their connection to one another and to the life they share. The Bible is a complicated book with mixed messages that have harmed as well as healed, I know, but I cannot help but think about how it begins, with the essential goodness of creation. In that first chapter of Genesis describing creation, the Creator God looks upon all that is created and sees that it is good, and so calls it good. Humankind is part of that creation, created in the image of God, Genesis explains, and it also is good. In the midst of all that goodness, however, is forbidden fruit, the knowledge of good and evil. When humans taste it, they suddenly know something apart from original goodness. While there are varying theological definitions of evil in theistic traditions, they almost always define evil in relation to the good. Our Unitarian forebearer, Ralph Waldo Emerson, argued that good was primary while evil was secondary. It only signified the lack of good. Emerson famously called evil so much non-entity. While I once agreed with him, I do not any longer. I believe that evil is very much an entity and that it is sadly all too active in our world. The definition that I have come to rely upon myself is a more classical theological formulation. That evil is that which seeks to separate us from goodness itself, from the good intent that gives rise to life. Evil has a drive to limit, repress, and even annihilate the good, and it is ruthless in pursuing those purposes. The outcry against the killing of George Floyd is an outcry against an obviously evil act, but also against an act that is all too emblematic of the evil of American racism itself. Racism in America seeks to separate, and as such, is unrelenting evil. It first separates Black and brown bodies from their inborn humanity. It then systematically separates white people like me from people of color and the harshest realities they endure. Such a separation only reinforces already terrible inequality. As the Supreme Court ruled decades ago, there is no such thing as separate but equal. All our segregated spaces and glaring disparities testify to the crushing legacy of racial subjugation in the United States. Earlier this month, when I saw those controversial pictures of President Trump standing in front of that empty Episcopalian church in Washington, thrusting a Bible toward the camera, I was repulsed by it. He had used troops and tear gas to clear the crowd of peaceful protesters from out in front of the White House so that he could stand apart from and above all the human anguish surrounding him, cynically wielding a religious totem. I mentally compared it to the snapshot I had seen of Floyd with those friends from his Bible study, that tangle of helping hands and human connection. I remembered again that evil always seeks to separate us from the good. Once we appreciate the dynamics of good and evil more fully, we become better able to notice the force of them in our world and to name them whenever and wherever we find them. Knowing good and evil allows us to make a series of decisions in response to both. We can refuse, resist, reject evil. We can embrace, affirm, and nurture good. There is some good in the worst of us and some evil in the best of us, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King contended. When we discover this, we are no longer strangers to ourselves, and we are no longer strangers to one another. We care less about who is right or wrong on this side or that. These are such polarized and fractious times. They are hard to endure, and they are not made any easier by our judgments of one another. We all need to attend to whether we ourselves are aligned with good impulses or evil ones. Across this country and around the world, there have been huge uprisings in response to the killing of George Floyd. Everywhere people are proclaiming their belief that Black Lives Matter. They do indeed. They always have, and they always will. It's the fact of that which has been discounted, forgotten, or denied. As Floyd was being asphyxiated on the pavement as the life was leaving his body, he called out for his mother, for the person that delivered him to life. At the Minneapolis Memorial for Floyd, the Reverend Al Sharpton spoke for the entire African American community when he demanded, "Get your knee off our necks." In commanding that, he was renouncing evil. Well, a few of the protests in the US have erupted in violent clashes. The vast majority of them are free from violence and even enmity. Facing down police and troops, protesters have said, "Kneel with us." And several of those uniformed people have, sometimes individually, sometimes collectively, sometimes readily, sometimes falteringly. Each one of those kneeling took a knee for Black lives senselessly lost. A knee can be used for good or evil. A Bible can be used for good or evil. We see how these things are true. Rhetoric can be used for good or for evil, and power too. All of us in America today simply need to stop pretending that we do not know which is which. Evil separates us from our shared humanity, and goodness connects us to it. You have to understand, Reverend Sharpton told the predominantly African-American mourners at the Fountain of Praise Church. If you bother any one of us, it's of value to all of us. He told the mourners that Floyd's killing had started a movement that's going to change the world. I believe that myself. A frank reckoning with American racism has begun. Reforms of law enforcement have begun in earnest, and closed cases have been reopened. Statues of slaveholders and colonizers have come toppling down, and Confederate flags are finally being banned. Some corporations have made the upcoming Juneteenth holiday commemorating the end of legal slavery in America a paid holiday for all their employees. Appropriately enough, that June 19th holiday celebrates a freedom that came far too late, but came at last. We cannot undo the tragic human toll of anti-Blackness in this country, but as people of faith, conscience, and goodwill, we can dedicate ourselves to stopping it from mounting any further. Perhaps the best known Bible passage addressing good and evil is the psalm spoken most often at funerals and gravesides, Psalm 23. In it, the psalmist declares, "Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. Surely." The psalmist recognizes the reality of evil openly and honestly, but still refuses to cower before it and refuses to be separated from the good because of it. These days, we all need to muster the sort of moral courage the psalmist articulates in order to claim goodness as our universal birthright. We cannot allow the evil we must face completely to negate the good that is still possible. After the Floyd funeral concluded, his body was taken to a Houston cemetery to be laid in rest alongside the remains of his mother, whose name he had cried shortly before he stopped breathing. May none of us ever forget the goodness of that life she bore. In the days to come, let us demand something different, just, better, and far more wholesome and much holier for the lives of George Floyd's children and their children too. We all know them now.
Please join me in singing our final hymn, "We Shall Overcome." We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we will walk hand in hand someday. We shall all be free. We shall all be free. We shall all be free someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall all be free someday. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall live in peace someday.
Now that our worship this morning is concluding, we extinguish our individual chalices. Our closing words are spoken in unison. Extinguishing this flame which has burned bright in our midst, we revere what has been kindled within each one of us. Warmth in community, the light of truth, a perpetual spark of hope. Knowing abundant blessing, we choose to bless the world. May the quality of each of our lives be our benediction and a blessing to all we touch. Those who take hold of life, may you find life returning your embrace. Those who sense God, may you find God always with you. Those who seek the right path, may the way appear ahead. Step out in faith and go in peace, remembering that you are well loved and we are all one. So it is. So may it always be.
Thank you.